You're listening to the Kaiju Apostle Podcast, a Godzilla podcast for hardcore and casual fans alike, and everyone else in between.
Welcome. Thanks again for tuning in to the Kaiju Apostle Podcast. My name is David, and as always is the magnanimous, is that how you pronounce it?
I will take it anyway.
It's a fancy word for awesome, maybe. Chris, how you doing tonight?
I am wonderful. I love talking about giant lizards, giant reptiles.
All right, we're going right into it. So it has been brought to our attention that the League or the Association of Paleontologists has now boycotted our podcast.
Yeah, that was the thing. We were really relying on their funding, playing their ads during the midweek break, but instead they've been pulled.
Yeah, they've officially said they're not going to stand for this nonsense anymore. No, so Henry from It Came From a Movie Monster podcast, which we cannot highly recommend enough, shared a message the other day, and he said, "Love the episode, but I cringe so hard when your guest describes Godzilla and Anguirus as lizards, because dinosaurs aren't true reptiles, and my paleontology background internally screams. But it's a good show." So, Henry, thank you for listening. And I think, Chris, you said you're just going to keep rolling with it. Is that right?
Well, tonight we're discussing the giant lizard bird, right?
Yeah. It's a giant chicken lizard bird.
Yeah. It's like Jurassic Park when they're like, oh, they didn't evolve into birds. And I'm like, have you seen this movie? They're already birds.
Yeah, this movie was pretty much Jurassic Park. You're right. I mean, we know exactly what we're talking about. So as always, thank you guys so much for listening. We were talking a little bit before recording about sharing some feedback that we get from each episode. And I know it seems silly to keep thanking you guys, maybe, but for me, that's kind of the posture I want to have in life, right? Being thankful. But it's been really awesome to get not only feedback, but just with this past episode doing Godzilla raids again, having some people message and be like, not only like, hey, they enjoyed it, but I'm going to watch this movie, or I did watch this movie with a different perspective. And I mean, for the most part, that's all I'm really like. That's all I could ask for is, even if you don't agree with me, being able to encourage deeper reflection on these films that, yes, they are enjoyable. Yes, they have giant lizards fighting with each other. They deserve a second, third, fourth watch, however many times, but just they do deserve a little bit of analysis. I mean, that's how they were made, and it doesn't mean you have to watch it that way every time, right? But there's something there, and I feel like if we don't do that, we're doing ourselves a disservice. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think part of it is what if at any part our discussions can help like fans reclaim some of the movies in the franchise, then we've done our job. Like, I'd hate to as Star Wars fans, we understand what it's like to not watch 1 to 3 out of the 10 until you watch it again and you're like, well, it wasn't really that bad.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun to know that, like, hey, let's start a conversation around a movie that's not well liked, and maybe we can realize it wasn't that bad, or we can realize, oh my goodness, it was that bad. But now I can articulate why, other than giant reptile fights are boring.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say we don't have nearly the discussion, like the amount of discussions around neo-Nazis and the Godzilla fandom as we do Star Wars. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that means we're a better fandom. Maybe they're just waiting to rise up or something. But
maybe when we get like the female kaijus, they'll get mad.
Yeah, That might be it. So, just something else thinking about, Chris, we haven't talked about this yet, is rather than watching the movies together, I like that we can watch the film separately, have a chance to like chew on it, and then come together, right?
Yeah.
It's not like it's just immediate knee jerk reactions. We have a chance to kind of formulate our thoughts, even though our episodes are like almost entirely unscripted. Like I've got notes and I know I'll get through 10% of them
Hmm.
just because of how the conversation's gonna go. Um, but yeah, I was thinking about that as I was watching the movie the other night. I was like, not that I wouldn't enjoy watching it with you, don't get me wrong, but I'm just like, gives me a chance to make sure that my thoughts are matured before I share them with the 5 listeners that we have.
Well, and the other thing is like, you sometimes watch a movie with someone else, and then they like immediately proceed to tell you everything they think about it.
Hmm.
I remember I was that guy when we watched Inception as a roommates back in college, and I was immediately like, "Oh, it's a dream," or "It wasn't a dream," or whatever. And
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh, great! I would have loved some time to think about that." And I was like, "Oh, well, shoot." So it's kind of nice that we're not kind of like telling each other what to think right afterwards either.
Yeah. Well, and I even think when you watch a movie, someone like I watch a movie with Mallory, my wife, for those who everyone doesn't know her. When I watch a movie with Mallory, I mean, there's times where like I feel like I'm almost pressured to feel a certain way because I'm
Hmm.
watching it with her, right? Like it's not even that it's she's making me want to do that, but I feel like there's just something deep down inside of us, like we want to have that shared experience, or like
Hmm.
we don't want to feel differently than other people. And I honestly think even with a certain film that came out this year that shall not be named for sake of not making people mad, but I almost felt like that one because I went to see it with my mom the first time. I went to go see it with my old roommate, and then I went to go see it with my friend of like 25 years, right? So I watched it with each of these people, and I feel like there's just this deep innate desire to like want to like it because they're liking it or whatever the case
Hmm.
is. But as I stepped away from this particular film and I've come back to it, I'm like, oh, I don't like it as much as I did then. And I think that was actually part of it is I didn't have I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I know you're talking about Dark Phoenix, and I'll name it for you.
Gosh,
That
dang it, man. Why'd you out me like
I
that?
know, I'm sorry, but it was the film of the year, possibly the decade, and I think our listeners deserve to know.
It's the next Citizen Kane.
Yeah, the Phoenix is Rosebud, right? Um,
Yep.
no, totally, because there's something about like, and I won't even use the Dark Phoenix, critically acclaimed film of 2019 as my example, but like when you show a friend a YouTube video or like your favorite Vine video, and you're like watching them rather than the video, hoping that they react the way that you want them to,
Hmm.
and then you're hoping you react the way they want you to.
Yeah.
It becomes more performative than enjoying it. So,
Yeah. I did that the other night. I made a meme video that hopefully will be posted by the time this episode's out, and I showed it to Mallory because there's every time I show her a video, I'm always hoping she'll laugh, and she never does. And this time she did, and it was awesome. But yeah, there's so many times I'll show her a video, and I'm like watching her, and yeah. So okay, it's I'm glad that I'm not alone there. So because we could probably turn this conversation into an entire episode. Let's
oh,
just fly right into the topic here.
pun intended, right?
We're yeah. Oh man, I was not fast enough. Sorry. Okay, so we are discussing the 1956 film Rodan. Sorry, Rodan. It's I think in the Japanese it's uh, Giant Monster of the Sky Rodan. I don't know. That's how I see a subtitle here. But anyway,
That's his character
so
name.
yeah. So fun fact: this film is actually the first color film that Toho released,
I thought
and
something was different.
yeah, I mean it's subtle. Um, but I thought, I mean, to be honest, it's obviously it's not like everything in the world was black and white before this, right? But for releasing their first color film, I mean, I loved how it looked.
Yeah, I thought that like it wasn't like a colorful movie, like wasn't a Marvel movie color, but like with the insects, the Meganulon.
Yeah,
I
the Meganula.
no, I'm gonna accidentally keep pronouncing it the same way the whole time.
Yeah, you're good.
There's some creative use of color there that can up the horror element a little. Even I would be curious how intentional the use of color was in the movie.
Yeah, that's the kind of film criticism I'm like not good at all.
Yeah,
But
same.
yeah, I mean, so you hit on the point that, October, it's kind of relevant for that, but you hit on the fact that this movie, more so than the last one, obviously, but it picked back up thematically where Gojira left off,
Hmm.
where I mean, for the most part, the first half of the film, it's not like a horror in the sense of like the hills have eyes or anything like that, but there's
Correct.
definitely a horror vibe to it. I mean, right off the bat, you get this floating body in the water, right? Like the music is just super foreboding. It's you really until you get later on in the film. I mean, and that's even pushing it. Like there isn't much humor in this film at all.
Mm-mm. Yeah, and I think part of what we see as horror in this movie is that we don't totally discover like we're not told about the monsters the way we are in the first two, where the
Hmm.
villagers are like, "Hey, we've been suffering from this for a really long time," and it's like, "What is it?" And oh, Godzilla. We've been struggling with Godzilla forever. This
Yeah.
time we're seeing like dead bodies, and we're hearing like spooky noises and the rising water. So this time we're like discovering it at the same time with the characters, and that really ups the creepiness factor in my mind.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and so first of all, the quote, it's like the policeman's head was hanging by a piece of skin. I'm like,
Oh
oh Jesus, like talk about just all right. There's definitely no way to get that image out of your head, right?
no,
Um, but what's funny is like how serious the tone is. The main actor, Kenji Sahara, he ends up becoming a recurring actor for a bunch of other Toho films, including King Kong vs. Godzilla. And what's funny is like in the further films, not all of them, but bunch down the road, I mean, he is more humorous, right? But this film definitely not at all. What I really loved about this film is we really get to see more of, I'm trying to think of the right word here. It's more of actually how the community is being impacted by this
yeah,
entire film, right? So, especially compared to Godzilla Raids Again. I mean, this is something where between the Meganula and Rodan, like this is disrupting the economy
hmm,
in this town, right? But it's also disrupting the people themselves, where we're starting to see people kind of starting to infight, right?
right.
At the very beginning of the movie, people are fighting. The women are starting to get upset at each other because they think so and so is actually the murderer. There's all these different things
Oh,
that, like,
right, right, right.
if you think about how a crisis happens within a community, it's not just, I don't know, it was a little bit more intimate. And I love that just because, I mean, we watch these films and we think of the destruction, right? And the
Hmm.
explosions and all this stuff, but we don't really think about like how this affects the day to day, that there's real repercussions of what these monsters do. It's not just San Francisco or Tokyo's destroyed, it's lives are forever changed by the existence of these monsters.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. It reminds me today of there's I guess an onion like website called The Hard Times, and
Oh,
yeah,
yes. Yes, yes,
I was
yes.
cracking up because one of the headlines today was 13 dead, 120 homeless, and a Ranger learns a good lesson about peer pressure after monster attack. And yeah, it was cracking me up because it's like, oh, when we focus too much on the peer pressure aspect, we forget that, like, oh, this is bad, right? Economies are
Yeah.
ruined. Some dude's house just blew up. So
Yeah.
I love that. And definitely, it wasn't even just, and I want to emphasize this now so I can come back to it later. The infighting is huge because it's not just that the economy gets worse. It's not just that, um, like the mining gets shut down. It's that
Mhm.
the people are fighting each other now. Like
Yeah.
all of the fear that you have of nuclear weapons from Godzilla and Godzilla Raids Again is now like the danger is other people. And that could be
Mhm.
even scarier sometimes.
Yeah. That's a really good point. You know, and you really start seeing, so Oswald Chambers, he did the My Utmost for His Highest Devotional.
Hmm.
Um, I'm kind of creating a quote out of a quote, right? But it's along the lines of like, crisis doesn't produce character, it merely reveals it.
Mm,
And in this movie, we see that happening where, my notes here, it's like, in grief, we tend to latch on to whatever answer we can find in front of us, even if there's no credible evidence, right? So that's what the women are doing here is there's no evidence of who the killer really is, especially as we start seeing that, like, his own friends are being killed. Like, why would he do that? Like, why would Goro kill his friends and everyone else? So clearly there has to be another answer,
right.
but we take the easy answer in front of us, right? And I think, what's funny is when I wrote my article on this, which I tried not to reference, I'm trying to like not just do a podcast over whatever we're in, but this and for Mothra, because I combined them, what I focused on was the idea of theodicy,
Yeah,
right? So how do we deal? Theodicy isn't just a problem of evil, but it's like how do we handle the existence of evil? We can sit here and try to say why evil exists, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter why it exists. It's the fact that it does exist. What do we do? And with Rodan and Mothra, which obviously we haven't watched that on the podcast yet, but it's not really a spoiler. We see monsters that aren't the product of World War II, of
right,
radioactive testing and all that. So these are things that exist even without the meddling of humans. So what do we do when there's a problem in our life that it's no one's fault? It's just there. What do we do? Do we sit here and we try to take the easy way? We try to blame others. So this whole film is dealing with how, like, it's their continual decisions of how to deal with this problem that isn't necessarily anyone's fault, but it's still affecting people's lives. And it's just I don't know, it's such an interesting film, especially compared to what we've already gotten. Like I said, it's more tonally consistent with Gojira, so obviously we have Ishiro Honda coming back, but it's it's definitely it takes it's almost like it takes the hopelessness of Godzilla Raids Again, because really, like, and obviously we're skipping to the end of the movie here, like, their answer is to create a volcanic eruption to destroy these
yeah.
monsters. Like, 3 movies in a row, it takes ingenuity to defeat the monster, right? So the first time around, see, I can't say oxygen on a podcast. I mess it up every time.
CO2.
So Gojira is the oxygen destroyer. Godzilla raids again. We're gonna bury Godzilla underneath a bunch of ice, and then Rodan, we're just gonna bury the giant chicken dinosaur
Mhm.
birds in lava. It has nothing to do with like actual military firepower. It doesn't even really have to do anything apart from the first film, I guess, with geniuses, right?
Right.
It's just like it's strokes of luck every time. And
Good
as these movies progress, we realize that, wait, these monsters never really go away. They're always like, they find a way to come back,
Right.
or in some
Yeah,
capacity.
because like what you've kind of already said, but it's not just that. Because I think at some point they like wonder if the war caused it, but then they
Hmm.
learn no, these are just ancient. If 200 million years is ancient, like these are just ancient animals. So even
Yeah.
if there wasn't like Godzilla-esque nuclear monsters, there would still be the threat of nature, ancient nature.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's where the doctor comes in. He's like, "This is just a theory," right? He's like, "I don't have any evidence for this," but and that kind of makes me wonder. Like, this movie is technically in the film continuity, but it never really explains that it is.
Yeah,
So,
I was very
like,
curious about that.
yeah, and I mean, this is 56, right? I don't think they were necessarily planning on creating a franchise at this point. So, like, on the one hand, I feel like it's in the continuity because, these giant dragonfly larvae show up and the main character is like, "Oh, a huge bug. I'll protect my girlfriend and get the cost without losing
Mhm,
my mind." Right? So you're just like, clearly, like, the existence of some giant monster isn't totally
mhm.
foreign, but then, Rodan shows up and everyone's flipping their lids. So, I don't know, there's not really a consistency in there. Like, I would be more surprised at a giant bug than I would a giant dinosaur.
Especially post-Godzilla.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm not really sure, like, how it plays in with all of that, but yeah, I mean, just I would say kind of the overall approach and yeah, I don't know. It's kind of one of those things where I don't try to read into it too much until the later films happen and then you start seeing some
Sure.
consistency. But so I feel like we've established there's kind of a horror vibe to it. I will say there was some unintentional humor in the film, and it has everything to do with the budget and
Yeah.
effects. But the part where the Megan Eula goes up and is on the hill, and he grabs the cops and rolls
Oh
down the
my
hill, it just made me think of Star Fox, and
Do a barrel roll.
I was just dying while
Oh,
watching
that
it.
was truly awesome. I was like, "Whoa, whoa, did they? Oh my gosh." I'm blown
Yeah,
away.
and yeah. And then even, like, the way my mind works is, the main doctor, I don't have his character name in front of me, but he's the same actor that played, Serizawa in Gojira. I'm like, "Oh, he got LASIK done, like, he can see now." And, like, again, that's not supposed to be humorous, but that's just kinda the way my mind works here.
Especially watching them so closely together like this. If there's really gonna be that much overlap, oh, we're absolutely gonna see more of it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, that's kinda the thing is it's just yeah, it's definitely a more serious film. Um I will say though, this film I feel like has like we've already kind of dealt with, the infighting and the way it affects the community, but
Mhm.
I feel like this film has more to say about like personal trauma
Mm.
than the first few films did, right? So
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
obviously we have the triggers that, our main character experiences in being in the Rodan nest, excuse me, Shigeru. So I don't know if you caught it. It was really interesting. There was foreshadowing in that it wasn't the birds that triggered his flashback, it was the eggs. But did you
Mm.
notice how many eggs were in the nest at that point?
Mm-mm.
So in the film, the actual bird eggs, there's 2 eggs. So he has that experience, he goes back to Rodan, but that was foreshadowing that there would actually be 2 Rodans in the
Oh
film.
wow.
Yeah, I noticed that, and I was like, "Oh, man," like, that was actually pretty neat. I didn't catch that last time I watched it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so, like, just between the music and the acting and, like, this is such a depressing ending to the film,
Mhm.
right? So, in the American version, it implies that the one Rodan couldn't live without the other, so it committed suicide.
Mhm.
I don't know if that was necessarily the authorial intent, but yeah, I mean, through the whole film, it's just like just loss after loss after loss after loss after loss. I mean, yes, they managed to wound the first Rodan, but like it still managed to destroy the bridge, right? And then
Right.
when it was in the city, it just caused all this destruction. And I mean, it's just there wasn't really a winner in this. And I just like again, it's just like Gojira. Where I sit and I'm like, okay, this is a really good film, but like I don't wanna watch this because it's enjoyable, like, the same way that I would watch How to Train Your Dragon,
Yeah.
right? Like, they're both good films in their own rights, but, like, this isn't a feel-good film.
Right. How to Train Your Kaiju.
And now we've given someone an idea if that doesn't exist already.
Copyright. Can't steal it.
It's just like I declare bankruptcy. I mean, you just got to say it. You're
No,
good.
I declared it.
So yeah, tell me. Obviously, most people are listening to this podcast because they love hearing your thoughts. Legitimately, like that's been the feedback I've gotten. So like, obviously, I've shared my thoughts here. How did you feel about the film as a whole? Not just, like let's just get into the meat and potatoes of this all.
Yeah, so actually, maybe I want to kind of go back first a little bit though, and I think
Okay.
that can both go back and answer your question.
Mm-hmm.
That and you mentioned authorial intent and why, like what happened with the second Rodan,
Mm-hmm.
but I wondered if they weren't supposed to be a parallel to the fighting humans, especially since there were two humans fighting at the beginning, and then the two Rodans. It's like you take the Bible for instance. There's a lot of times when animals upstage the humans, like they're more obedient, they're more wise than humans are. So you think of Balaam's talking donkey or the lion in First Kings 13, both both of who obey God, even though the human doesn't. So I was wondering if the Rodan's connection being like so tight wasn't supposed to like contrast with the humans like fraying and splitting connections at all.
Hmm. Yeah, because I mean, obviously, Godzilla raids again. There was no love lost between the two.
Right. So now these this it felt just more like especially with you now pointing out the two eggs, it seems like all of the numbers were pretty significant. So I was really curious watching the end if the two Rodans weren't supposed to be more heavily parallel than we thought they were. So I know I'm dropping this on you now, but do you think I'm like completely off base or
I don't think you're completely off base. I mean, I didn't think about it that way. So I don't I'm sitting here and I'm like, I can't say I disagree, but that's something I would have to think about more
yeah.
for sure.
But
Um
I think maybe too like and I don't want to dive too deeply into like postmodern readings, postmodern literary criticism at all.
I
But
mean that's the only valid literary critique, so just keep going.
oh, the author is technically dead. But
Yeah, there is no author.
yeah, but I don't know. I'm just curious, especially as we're like the whole point of this podcast, right? Is when we're doing it in chronological order, we're letting the films speak to the other films. And
Mhm.
this one, as we've kind of said this time and last time, wasn't necessarily created as Godzilla 3. So
Yeah.
we already are kind of loosening the bounds of authorial intent anyway. But
Mhm.
I was just kind of curious because, like, the insects at the beginning behave very much like the humans, but then the Rodans come and shows everyone up. Like, yeah, they're destroying jets, but also, like, they're animals being threatened, so what else would they do about that?
But see, I'm so glad you brought that up because I wanted to mention that without derailing or having it, an organic segue.
Hmm.
Um, I was thinking about it and I'm like, so obviously the Rodans just hatched, right?
Hmm.
But did you pay attention to the Rodan's flight patterns at all?
Other than the fact that they could turn around real quick?
Yeah, just so like the trail the first one left, it was making loops. Like, why do you think it would have made loops? Like, if you watch a film and an air fighter, a jet pilot is doing a loop, why would he do that normally?
Well, I would assume as a bird, chicken, lizard, dinosaur, they were like protecting a nest or watching something.
Oh, okay. So maybe I wasn't going the right way. So in my
Oh,
head, I'm thinking of like if I watch a movie and someone's just doing loop de loops, so they're having fun, right? It's like, oh yeah,
oh,
look at what I'm
oh,
doing,
hmm,
And so I'm like, this bird, chicken, dinosaur, lizard thing is okay. I can't keep doing this. This pteranodon, right,
yeah,
is up in the air and like for the first time in its life is flying and is just having fun and spreading its wings literally. And then all of a sudden these little like mosquito gnats are shooting at it, and it's
Uh-huh.
like, so what is it supposed to do? Like, it has no point of reference for this at all, except, ow, this kind of hurts.
Uh-huh.
And it's going to lash out. And so, going back to that theodicy idea of just like this thing that exists that isn't necessarily like man created or whatever, but like, I don't feel like what this thing is doing, like, Rodan isn't radioactive. It's not, it's a naturally occurring thing. It's just, it's nature. We think about sharks and the way that sharks, like if it bites a human, I
Mm,
mean, the shark isn't evil. That's just the shark's nature, right?
right.
So these animals, unlike what I would say Godzilla, that was, nuked and now he's pissed off and going out and all that, like, this is just an animal that is trying to exist and coexist.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I know, so like, when Rodan kills the pilots, like, it probably didn't even think about what it was doing. It didn't realize it was killing someone. It
Mm-hmm.
just like, oh, okay, this annoying thing is gone now. So like that added a almost a more depressing tone to the
Yeah, I
film
was
that
just gonna say, now the fact that they were like little babies having fun and then they're burned to death by lava, it's like, oh my god.
Yeah.
It's so
No,
sad now.
it's infanticide. I mean, it's kaiju infanticide is what this movie is,
Oh man,
which is would be like an awesome death metal band. Um,
gosh.
but yeah, I mean, I don't know. It makes me think too, like, oh my god, what would happen if these these Rodans actually came to like full maturity, right?
Right.
Like how much destruction would have happened. So yeah, not trying to derail. I want to hear your thoughts. Just
No, no, no.
you brought up the flying and the being a kid and all that. I'm like, oh god, like that made me think about what I watched last night. So
Well, because like weren't they trying to decide was it a sonic blast that destroyed the jets or they
yeah,
almost for a while they're like was it even on purpose sort of.
yeah, there was a lot of confusion in what was going on, and that was even like even when the Rodan exists, or I don't know if Rodan they had identified it yet or not, but like they were thinking there was multiple bogeys, right? So on the one hand, it makes you think, oh well, he's just so fast, but that was already a sign that like no, there's two of these out here.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's so many elements of foreshadowing to the existence of two of these that you miss if you're really not expecting it.
And to kind of keep along the same track though, we've discussed like the ethics of killing Godzilla. One
Hmm.
because the movie brought it up specifically, because and then in the second one, you don't really kill Godzilla, you just bury him and hope he gets too chilly to do anything about it.
Yeah.
And now the ethics of like, well, they're just giant animals.
Hmm.
Like, would we do the same for a giant corgi or a giant like lab, like dogs we like? Maybe a giant Rottweiler we wouldn't think about, but it's curious that these are told through the lens of dinosaurs, and I might be curious to see what some of the original filmmakers might do with giant radioactive like Shih Tzus.
Yeah. Hey, we're a family friendly podcast here.
Sorry, poop zoos.
Crap zoos. Um, no, but I think, maybe that is something where dinosaurs are so far removed, they're so abstract, right? That like we couldn't even really comprehend doing anything with that
Hmm.
because we have no point of reference, right? Or like, the movie Them, it's giant ants. Like, of course, ants are evil, destroy them.
Hmm.
But you look at Kong, King Kong, and I mean, he's an ape. Like, there's
Please use it.
it's a more sympathetic film, So I
Sure.
mean, I'm not partial towards corgi, so nuke the. But like, at the end of the day, yeah, I get what you're saying though, and it's I think there's something to be said about that.
Yeah, it's just this interesting concept of like othering where the giant insects definitely obviously feel like the enemy because they're giant insects. And just like you were saying with ants, like what's the worst they do? Come near my picnic? Unless you're Yogi Bear, that's not a huge issue. It's not a capital offense, but
No.
we do kill them.
Yeah, so I think you're onto something with that. And for the record, I am usually really good at watching my tongue, so I'll have a funny edit for that, which by this point you've already listened to it, but you'll never know what I really said.
Oh, gosh. Sorry, now I'm just thinking about, because is Mothra next?
I don't remember what's next. I think it might be Varan.
Okay. But still, we'll be getting soonish to. Well, I was laughing at Mothra because I was thinking of Godzilla moth memes.
Hmm.
And now, but I was thinking too, like, what would a moth be like in terms of the ethics of fighting a moth compared to
Yeah.
giant three-headed dinosaur kings or, even
God,
mini Godzilla, my favorite character whom I've yet to meet.
you're gonna kill all of our viewership because of this episode. So I'm gonna ruin it by accidentally dropping a few swear words, which again I've edited out. I'm so sorry. I'm a 30-year-old adult. Please bear with me. And then with all of your inaccurate descriptors, we're just this podcast's over before it ever began. Ugh.
We're just shooting ourselves in the foot. We're already culling our membership, so we're gonna go down about 50%. I'm thinking.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, we will have a pretty interesting legacy. It's yeah, we'll have something to say. But
I can just imagine now everyone listening is firing up their phone keyboards to start texting me. Like they're gonna find me and follow me on Instagram, not to see my beautiful pictures, but to be like, his name's Mothra, his name's Rodan. Please.
and Minya, not Mini Godzilla.
Well, he's still cute though.
Yeah. So, and just in case you do want to harass Chris, his Twitter and Instagram handle is at Chris CHRIS and Worms WERM as in Mary and S. There you go.
Thank
Don't
you.
say I never did. Yeah, don't say I never did anything for you. So you're talking about the ethics of killing,
Mhm.
because that's something we like discussing on here is ethics and murder and all that.
Usually together, not separate.
Yeah. But did you notice how okay, so with Rodan, the fighter managed to damage Rodan. He goes into the water, which then he still destroys the bridge anyway. But
Mhm.
so a single fighter jet did that. But then all of these artillery, it's just like an onslaught of missiles and ar- everything and not even a scratch. So I'm just sitting here. I think that's the only kind of complaint I have about this film is I'm sitting there and it's 5 minutes of just nonstop dinosaur abuse
Mhm.
and nothing happens, but then a single jet previously manages to wound it somehow. And I'm like, I mean, I know this is plot armor and all that, but I was just so I'm watching a movie about a giant dinosaur, and this is what takes me out of it.
Yeah,
Is
fair enough.
this?
Yeah, it does kind of feel like, oh no, the movie's over. It's time to start killing him. That does kind of. This is unrelated, but
Mhm,
that gave me a kind of an interesting thought. I hope, but I did love the way that where Godzilla and Godzilla Raid again, we're trying to show you how strong Godzilla was by being impervious to everything,
mhm,
But I think this one did a good job of showing how scary the Rodans were by they killed off the insects who are killing off the people. So kind of like if in Dragon Ball Z, right? When
mhm.
Future Trunks shows up and he cuts Frieza in half in 3 seconds.
Yeah, and then he
Spoiler
does all
alert
his
for
weird
20-year-old.
karate moves and yeah.
Yeah. It's such a cool way to show how strong a person is when the previous
Mhm,
big threat is just taken care of so easily. So
yeah,
when the Rodans start killing the insects, you're like, oh crap, these guys. I mean, the insects were huge; they were a huge problem, and now they're just getting eaten. How bad are these guys? I thought that was a really great touch for me.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's where Dragon Ball got its inspiration for sure. Because
Yeah.
that's like the only consistency in Dragon Ball is, oh, you thought this guy was bad. Wait for 20 more episodes and you'll figure out who the real enemy is.
Wait, now I'm waiting for the Godzilla movie with Shenron in it.
Yeah.
King of the Dragons.
Yeah, that show is, God. That's a sore point for me. I feel like I've wasted so much of my life on that show. So I was thinking like how different this film would have been in the modern age because, like not only did Rodan manage to get up in airspace without anyone noticing, but like going all around and no one really knew what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Like nowadays, I feel like we would have already had it on like TikTok and all these other apps, right?
Right.
So I was gonna say Vine because you brought up Vine earlier, but unfortunately that
Rest
is
in
no
peace,
longer a
fine.
thing. But yeah, it's just random thoughts. It's just how different this film would have been
Well,
nowadays.
yeah, especially like thinking that they saw them. Well, they thought they only saw the one, but they saw both of them all around the globe. Like, yeah, you'd see like CNN, the BBC, whatever they listen
The
to.
BBC.
What?
The BBC.
Yeah, you got to use the proper title.
Yeah.
Like all of these different, they'd be like reporting like within seconds, and there would be pictures on Twitter of the giant. Yeah, I don't know. It would be really interesting. It's the same way that like Home Alone would never happen in 2019. I feel like yeah, the Rodans would be taken care of pretty quickly.
Yeah. And it would have been on like InfoWars, like Alex Jones would have been going on about chemtrails,
Yeah, they're
with
making
Rodan,
fucking
some
Kaiju.
weird
Okay?
conspiracy. Yeah. Um so not only that too, but like I was thinking about watching the film this time around, so I didn't bring it up last time, but like did you notice the use of paintings in this film?
No man, you can probably whenever you ask, did you notice? Assume no.
Okay. So the part where Shigeru is like climbing out of the crater,
Uh huh.
like when they walk over to look at the landscape, like that's all painted
Oh,
there.
okay.
So the ending of Godzilla Raids Again, it was a painting. It blends into a painting.
Mm-hmm.
So I've noticed that there's another scene too, but I thought that was kind of cool. I'm just trying to think of some other thoughts. Like it's weird. I don't feel like there's a whole lot to talk about this film because it is pretty straightforward as a whole. But I mean, just between the darker tone, I mean, the music is, God, that just sets the tone for
Mm-hmm.
the film immediately. But yeah, just as a whole, like this film itself, I mean, I feel like the tone you really see it encapsulated in the part where you have the groom. I think they're married, like the guy and the girl. They go out on the trip, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to me, like the way that he just leaves her behind. So again, you kind of get into this whole like what happens in a crisis? What do you do? So you see the people in the beginning where they're just turning against each other. But then you see someone like Shigeru where not only does he protect, Kyo, sorry, in that moment, but this is also someone where at the end of the film he has empathy
Mm.
towards Rodan, right? So I feel like it highlights, and all these films kind of do, but it really highlights the kind of people we have in society where you have people who are empathetic, they look at suffering and they can relate to it, who are going to protect others, right? And then you also have the people where they jump on the first chance to fight with people. They're going to assume the worst in people. They're going to believe the rumors, right? And not that that's what this film necessarily is, but I feel like this film just does a good job of highlighting the pros and cons of humanity
Yeah.
in different ways in a way that Godzilla Raids Again just absolutely did not do whatsoever.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's a good point. There's definitely a much deeper character study with what feels like we didn't quite get to know everyone, I think, as well as we did in Gojira, but
Mm-hmm.
I think we get broader strokes that are a little more insightful to humanity at large.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I was bringing up with the two Rodans being a contrast to the two at the beginning. Was that, yeah, really what we've been saying this whole episode is that crises bring out who we are.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, it's these moments of like when a Shih Tzu hits the fan, right?
mm-hmm.
Like you don't have in that moment. It's not I'm going to become a better person. 99% of us, that's not what happens.
No.
99% of the time, we see who we really are. You know?
Oh yeah, we're not gonna find ourselves to be like if a dog is running in the middle of the street, we're not the ones who are gonna jump in front of the car to save it. We're gonna be like, oh crap, but really not do much about it. Or in crisis, we're not gonna be the one who throws ourselves in harm's way. We're gonna find out, oh wow, I'm really kind of a chicken.
Yeah. Well, so two things. One, I don't know if I would throw myself in the way of a car for a dog. I know that sounds bad. Like
Yeah, that's kind
I'm
of a
not I'm
lame
not
example.
heartless. Now, if it was a child, yes,
Oh yeah,
absolutely. Like
totally.
I will say human life is more important than animals in a theological perspective. But I will say a couple years ago I don't remember what I was doing. I was driving and I saw someone hit a dog and they drove off and I went and found the dog and looked at the oh god, I'm getting emotional thinking about this. I looked at the collar, figured out where it lived. I managed to get a bag and gloves and I took it to the home. I know that's kind of a morbid thing to do, but I wanted
Hmm.
to at least let the people know what happened and unfortunately they were very irresponsible owners and were not paying attention, so I kind of got angry about that. So on another note, did you I'm gonna ask it again. Did you notice how the scientific explanation we touched on it before? Like this was so much more plausible
Oh
than
yeah,
the Godzilla Raids
okay,
Again
that I did
argument.
notice.
I was like, you had to have noticed this one.
It seems much less. This one was just more like, yeah, they're animals. And I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it was so simple. It was like in Godzilla Raids Again, they over explained it to the point where I'm like, okay, yes, I know I'm watching a monster movie, but like you just ruined this for me.
Yeah, and as much as I appreciated it, I kind of don't want it to all just be, well, this is an animal. Well, this one's also an animal. Like, I hope there's still kind of a good mix of the two. But yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely felt like a little more relief this time thinking, okay, animals were just bigger back then. That's okay.
hmm Um, I don't know if you're really gonna get that with this era of films. The Heisei films, I can think most of the enemies have some kind of explanation. They're not always good, but they're there. I think with the Showa era, you don't really get that, which is honestly it doesn't bother me. I'm kind of like I'd rather you just not say something, or at least have it very simple
Sure.
instead of trying to come up with a super elaborate backstory that I mean God, you know how it is with Star Wars where you can just like try to take one simple thing and then it ends up becoming its own mini series and you're just like Phasma.
Yeah,
As much as I didn't even mind the novel, I was just like, we didn't need
right.
this at all. Yeah, but thankfully you don't really get that in the Godzilla films.
No, not yet.
Yeah. So overall consensus, like I said, not I wouldn't say there's like this super deep underlying approach that we even I would say even with Godzilla Raids Again because we kind of had a not that it was even a bad movie, but I felt like we were forced to do that.
Yeah.
But I felt like with this film, there's enough to talk about just in different approaches that
Hmm.
there wasn't like we had to make a dissertation out of it. So overall, what were your thoughts? Just kind of I'll turn it over.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I kind of liked, and I'm curious. Well, for anything else, like Godzilla Raids Again, I was like, that was a good movie. If they had only made two, I would have said it was a good franchise, but been okay to see it end. And I
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think that's high praise when I put it that way. But
It's not.
I would have thought that if those were the only two, that was great. But it's okay if it ended. But this one, I think, like, it opened up the whole franchise so much more in a way that I'm like, okay, wow. Now I'm really curious to see what they can do with more time and more monsters. So even if I didn't like it on its own, the possibilities that it opens up has just made me a lot more excited for like what we're going to be discussing and what we're going to be watching.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give it a lot of credit for that. Like one thing in particular that I don't have too many thoughts about, but like I really liked how this movie started to hint at like a worldwide problem with the kaiju. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
like Godzilla was such a localized threat, and now Europe and all of these other countries are getting kind of like, wait, what the heck's going on over there? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm curious to see how that's going to play out. So I thought I really truly like if I would have if you would have asked me what a ideal kaiju movie it would be probably this one. It wasn't. You're right. There wasn't a ton to talk about, but it was insightful. It gave us quite
Mm-hmm.
a few like really good images of what breakdown looks like, what crisis looks like. Gave us some pretty good monster action, some pretty plausible monster action. So in all, I really enjoyed it. I think the tonal shift was jarring for me personally, but it worked. So I would be cool if most of them were like this one. And I know that's probably a tall order, but
Yeah, and see, this was what's gonna be funny watching Varan next because I haven't even seen that one. From what I've been told, I feel like this is gonna be kind of an emotional roller coaster for us.
that's okay.
But yeah, but here's the thing though: is even what you're saying here, like, isn't this the point of the podcast? So, like, you watch this film, and if you just watch it for what it is, it's a good film. Like, it's a good boots on the ground. Like, this is what the day to day kind of looks like whenever a monster
Mhm.
attacks. But if you watch the film and you see how people are reacting, because to me, that's where the film is, right? It's not what the monsters are doing, it's what the people are doing because of the
Mhm.
monsters or what they were doing before the monsters came in and how that changes. So to me, that's why kaiju films even exist. Like, if it was just the monsters, there wouldn't be anything
No.
there. I mean, genuinely, there's nothing, like, I can't think of a single monster film that doesn't have some kind of humans in there that's worth watching. First of all, I can't think of any monster films that are just monsters, right?
Monster.
Because I would just, I mean, if that's what you want, play a video game.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'm gonna be honest, like, if that's like what you want, that's fine. But like, that's what video games are for. Well, some,
Mhm.
right? Not like The Last of Us, but like when I watch a film, I want to see like an actual story, and I think this is a wonderful example of how you can get both
Mhm.
and you don't have to compromise, right? So Gojira again was a good example of that. Godzilla raids again, not so much. Rodan is back to where that was, um, and I think again, Ishiro Honda has a lot to do with that, which makes me wonder how Varan's gonna go because again, I've heard some interesting stuff on that.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I would be in the same boat where if I'd never watched these films, I feel like I'd be in a similar position as you, where if I watched the first two films, be like, huh, okay, well, that was a fun ride. But now that this is in the picture, you'd be like, okay, like it's almost like we're back, right?
Right.
It's kind of so I can relate to that. Um, so I think moving forward, what I'm going to start doing is, since this is a new film for you, obviously don't feel all these films are new for you, so don't feel like you have to live by this answer. But like on a scale of 1 to 5, where would you rate this film?
Hmm. Oh gosh. I would put it. Can I increase it to 10?
Yeah, let's go 1 to 10.
So I would say I would put it at 8, which means that if nothing beats it, it was still really good. There might be some places like you had mentioned the ending when it kind of starts getting wrapped up a little too quickly. Like, 5 more minutes or maybe a little more plausible explanation would have just put this into like superb and maybe like and I don't want to fault it too much, but we talk about him going down the hill. There are some distracting parts, so it's a little shy of perfect, but yeah, I would probably put it at an 8. There's some room for improvement, but it's probably going to set the bar for a while, I think.
Yeah.
Where rates again, probably closer to a 6. Maybe, yeah. I would still put it more on the good side. And with Gojira, maybe a 7. There are a couple of hitches for me, a couple of trying to just get used to the franchise.
Yeah.
But I think this one is like, okay, we're hitting our stride. We know where we're going. And as long as it can keep up the momentum for a while, I could see myself being pretty happy with it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was really excited to have you watch this film. I had to keep myself from texting you and being like, what do you think? What do you think?
Well, and that's why I almost didn't want to tell you when I watched it. Just because I wanted to keep it a little more low-key until we got to talk now.
No, and that's honestly what you need to keep doing. So, we are getting close to an hour.
Yeah.
So that's kind of our commitment, is trying to keep this an hour-long episode. So we have 3 questions for tonight. Some of them are pretty easy. So Zimzilla99 asked, you get to design a new Godzilla monster. What does it look like and how does it act? I feel like you already answered that with a giant corgi.
Yeah, you would be one of them.
Yeah, and what would you name it?
Oh gosh, Wait, I want to really just knock this out of the park. So you answer while I think.
Okay, so I know what you need to answer for the name, but I don't know if you would necessarily agree. So I think you just need to call it Cheddarzilla.
Oh, and then when there's a second Cheddarzilla, we could say like,
you're not Cheddar.
Zilla.
You're just some common bitch.
I gotta edit something else out.
This one wasn't a swear. It's a female dog.
I know. For the record, that's a quote from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Yeah, I feel like at this point, there's no pretenses. I mean, we're adults. We're not fundamentalist Christians. Yeah, see, I don't even know how to answer that, to be honest. I mean, if I was back when I was like 10 and, well, I'm not saying it's like immature, but like I used to. So one of the things I did when I was at quote unquote daycare, which was really just after school care, my friends and I would sit around and design our own video game manuals, which nowadays kids don't even get those anymore.
I know. They just
But
put the little thing in the box.
Exactly. So we would design our own manuals. So back then, I'm sure I'd have 100 ideas. We made up our own Mortal Kombat characters, stuff like that. So yeah, I really don't have an answer. I'm going to try to think on that some more. Maybe we'll come back to that the next episode. Just know that I did get that. But the way we do this is I don't ask until the episode. So it's kind of hard to do that. So Ryan, and I think it's Zeton or Zeton, I don't know. I think it has to do with Ultraman. He said if Rodan wasn't a giant chicken bird dinosaur, so Pteranodon, yeah, his words, would the film be better or worse, and why? Well, if it was a giant corgi, it would have been like Oscar bait.
Clearly.
So.
Could have been the Hurt Locker 56. Yeah.
How do you feel about that film now?
I haven't seen it.
Oh, okay. I would love to talk about that film sometime.
Did it have a cape
Even
in
if Jeremy Renner
wasn't part of the MCU.
No.
Well, that explains that.
No. No, Jeremy Renner is an interesting actor. So I think for me, I love that it's a Pteranodon. So I feel like if they would have replaced it with any other, but that's such a hard question to answer, though. It's just kind of like, I get what they're trying to say, but I'm one of those people too where like, I know it sounds bad, but we're gonna pull Hitler into play, right? So it's like, with World War II, like people have been like, well, if we didn't kill Hitler, the war would have done this and that. I'm like, well, you can't really say that. Like, there's no way to prove that, right? So it's hard for me to say like if the film would be worse or not because I have no way of being able to do that.
Right.
So if let's put it this way, so I'm gonna change his question. So if Rodan was really Mothra, would the film be better or worse, and why? And I would say it would be worse because, and yeah, I don't even really have an answer for that.
I think, and I think both the original question and your kind of twist on the question are both helpful because I think part of what makes this movie work is that the terror is in the sky now too. It used to just be the land and the sea, but now the sky isn't
Yeah,
safe
yeah.
either. It's not as if people would have lived on blimps for the rest of humanity if Godzilla wasn't stopped, but like there's just nowhere safe now from kaiju. So I do think this film wouldn't have worked had it not been a sky-based creature. And knowing what I do about Mothra attracted to giant lamps, he doesn't seem as scary. But or like giant mothballs that we can put in Godzilla's sweater closet to keep him away. Like all of these puns I should be saving for next episode.
Well, 2
I
episodes from now.
okay, 2 episodes, yeah. No, okay, all of my bad joking aside, like I think had it not been a sky-based creature and it was more kind of the same in terms of another land-based creature, I don't know if it would have had the same impact. But now just the fact that like the terror is going sky high and worldwide, that changes the game. So I think had it not been him, I think it would have been worse.
Okay. And you know how I feel about that answer? It's gonna be that was a home run. Seriously, that I can't agree with you more. I didn't even think about that. You know, like even when I did my blog, right, I coupled Mothra with Rodan thinking about, just being a different element. But you're right. I mean, it's however you want to interpret these kaiju, you're right. It's like now everything is encompassed in this new world. Like there's no escape, and yeah, that's a really good perspective. Thank you, Chris. And last question is favorite moment of the film.
Well, gosh, I think we can both answer at the same time that it's the hill scene.
Yep. Do a barrel roll. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so bad. Like that's how I'm going to answer it, but that's just who I am. I mean, my favorite movie in the world, I can honestly say is Hot Rod, right? So when someone asks me that, I mean, as much as I love good film and cinema, I'm always gonna look for the cheap laugh. Always.
Oh yeah. And I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna actually say it actually probably is mine too, for a little different reason. And I think part of it is just it's a good reminder that this franchise has some heart to it, some camp to it, that they did the best they could with what they had.
Absolutely.
And sometimes I think that endears me to a movie more than billions of dollars of like budget, right? Like if they had just painted Josh Brolin purple for Endgame, I would have been like, okay, they're doing their best. They didn't want to spend billions of dollars there. But just sometimes being reminded that even super serious franchises like Godzilla still have like some of these little hiccups, some of these fun little quirks. I really appreciate that. That's part of the heart of that's part of its heart to me.
Absolutely. And that's what you get with a lot of these tokusatsu films, right? And you talked about Power Rangers a few times. Like that is what it is. You could have people who are going to hate it for it, they're going to critique it for it. But I'm like, but you're also working with, I don't want to say their limitations. Like at the time they were limitations, right?
Yeah.
Now those limitations have helped define what the genre is. So, yeah, absolutely. It's more than just the humor element. You're just like, this is what the film is. They could have, nowadays everything's just reshot to Kingdom Come, right?
Right.
And everything's just just overly CGI'd. I mean, it's easier to, I don't know if this is actually a thing, but I'm just coming up with some where it's just like, I'm sure there's movies where, you know, you'll re-CGI someone's face. Like, we'll get to that point of just doing
Yeah.
that if there's a mistake, right? And because that's something where, like, I'll watch a show and I'll notice when people do like their, I don't know what you call it, but when they go to the studio and record their lines again. So I'll notice like when
Mhm.
stuff doesn't line up, right? Because they'll shoot
Mhm.
the scene and their mouth is moving, but it's not lining up with the dialogue, but they keep the scene because the scene worked. So, like, as weird as it sounds, I appreciate that, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's not perfect, but like they're just sticking with it, and they do a little bit of editing. That's normal. But that's the thing I love about these older films is, like, for better or for worse, like, they're not spending 2 years in post-production.
Exactly. There's a movie to be made. There's a message to share. We're just gonna do it.
Mhm. Which,
I think
yeah.
real quick, since I know we're trying to keep this close to an hour. Two quick things I still want to keep on this point
Mhm.
is one, it's hilarious to think of me, or for me to think of these like super serious directors who are like, I guess I have to use the puppet man rolling down a hill now
Mhm.
because that's what our options are. And thinking about like the fact that they worked with giant lizard costumes. But secondly, like think about today that you hear all the time, especially with Star Wars. We know like three franchises. Forgive us. Like everyone wants everything to look like it did when it was a puppet, when it was a practical effect.
Mhm.
So like we do love our CG, but when we're asked, we're like, no, 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 no. We want it to be puppety. So I don't know. Nothing really groundbreaking or insightful there. Just it's just curious that we want to go back there.
Yeah. No, you're right. And I mean, but that's what's so funny though is no matter how much we talk about the CGI, it's always the old practical effects that mean the most, for sure.
Hmm.
So here's the thing, guys. Every week we're gonna pour one out for someone who died in our film. But before we do that, we just want to thank you guys for listening. As we've discussed before, this is a very unscripted podcast, and we're just gonna keep it that way. We're not here for the money or for the accolades. I was trying to think of a word.
Otherwise, we would have fought harder to keep the Paleontology Alliance.
I know. Sorry, Henry. But seriously, if you made it this far, and we're just here to have fun. We're here to try to, you know, inspire a little bit further thought into the kaiju genre, and then exposing people to new things, right? I mean, Chris, again, I cannot stress how thankful I am that you're willing to be a part of this journey with me, especially since we added like 10 new episodes to our schedule. Um,
Yeah, we did.
yeah, so little update. Initially, the schedule is just going to be Godzilla films because that's what my blog schedule was. And then we decided that, you know what? No, I am the Kaiju apostle. Like, we're going to talk about Kaiju films in general. And there's a lot of them that we would miss if we didn't do that. So Chris brought up a good point that there's other films that would color our perspective. And that's what we're going to do. But we're not going to spoil those changes. So you'll figure out which ones are which. But do you have any parting thoughts before we mourn our way out of here?
I think, well, no, just also want to thank everyone who's been sticking around. It's kind of crazy to think that people have wanted to hear, 2.5 hours of already released content,
Mm-hmm.
and people have listened to that much, let alone another hour and 10 now. That's so crazy. Something like I never growing up would have thought, yeah, the Godzilla podcast that I'm on would be doing pretty well for itself. Just funny the way that this works. So thanks for listening and supporting that dream I didn't know I had.
Yeah, but hey, sometimes you find it, and I think as in the famous words of Words Played, I don't chase dreams, I stalk them.
Yeah.
So
And you don't chase waterfalls either because we ain't no scrubs.
not at all. So we're just gonna go ahead and end this with a memoriam for the two. I think it was two policemen who died in that vicious Megan Mueller
Ill.
roll down the hill. So I can't do it. I'm sorry.
Thank you for listening to the Kaiju Apostle podcast. You can tune in to future episodes on most major podcast distributors, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. For more information, including music credits, please visit our website at www.thekaijuapostle.com or at instagram.com/the.kaiju.apostle. We appreciate your support and hope to hear from you soon.